Let's take a look at how to organize Maya scenes. But before we do that, let's go ahead and make sure that we set our project to the proper folder. So we're going to go File, Set Project, and we're in Chapter 2. So let's go ahead and set this to our Chapter 2 folder in our exercise files. Now once I do that, I can open the scene that we're going to work with, which is 0201. So now let's take a look at the outliner. The outliner is a great way to organize and navigate all of the objects in your scene. Now it is a floating window or it can be seen in a viewport. So if you want to see it as a floating window, we can go into Window, Outliner, and the window will appear here and we can use it. Now another way to look at it is in a viewport. If we want, we can configure a viewport to be an outliner, but we also have a preset already set up here. If I click on this particular preset, it'll give me a perspective window and the outliner here on the left. Now I'm going to use the outliner as a floating window, so I'm going to go back here to the regular layout and go back to Window, Outliner. So here's our outliner, and as you can see, it has a list of all of the objects in our scene. Now each of these objects has a name as well as an icon associated with it. So for example, this icon here looks like a little camera, and that's actually the camera that is the perspective window. So this is my perspective window here, which is actually just a camera in Maya. We also have ones for our orthographic viewports, our top, front, left, and side. Now these are grayed out, and that means that they're hidden. And we'll get to this in a little bit, but just know that grayed out means hidden. Now as we get further down, you'll see that we have the actual objects in our scene. So we have the chair. So we have chair 01, 02, 03, and 04, plus the table and the bowl, as well as lights in the scene. Now notice these also have different icons associated with them. So the chair is a polygonal object and it has this icon associated with it. The bowl is what's called a NURBS surface, and I'll explain what that is a little bit later. But just know that this icon here stands for NURBS surface. And then the lights themselves in the scene, well, they look like little spotlights. Now each object can be selected from within the outliner. If you want, you can also double-click on the object to rename it. So if you wanted to rename Chair 01, Chair 1, for example, you could do that and just rename it. Now, if you want to select multiple objects, all you have to do is hold down the Shift key. So I can Shift select one or two objects, or I can Shift select over a range. So if I go from 1 down to 4, I can select all of those. Now, if I want to select just individual objects, I can use the Control key. So if I select this chair and hold down the Control key, I can skip over chair 2 and just select chair 3. Same would go for the lights. So I can select this point light and Control select maybe this one and that one. And this is great because it allows you to select whatever you want. Now, one of the things you might notice is that when I select a light, it actually shows up here. We have this default light set show up, and that's because that light is part of a group. Notice how a couple of these entries have a little plus sign next to them. So for example, this table, if I hit a plus sign to that, you'll see that underneath this main table, I have an object called the tabletop. And then I have another plus sign, and if I click there, you can see that, well, I have the bottom of the table. And below that, I have each individual leg of the table. Now, this is called a hierarchy. So each object in the scene is actually a child of the one above it. This is very similar to the folder system that you would see on the hard drive of your computer. You would have folders and folders within folders and also objects within folders, files, that sort of thing. So when I select something that is a child or is beneath something, the top ones gray out just to show you that they're part of that overall hierarchy. And the same goes for this bowl. So if I select the bowl, I select everything underneath it. So if I wanted to, for example, move this bowl, all I have to do is hit W to go into the Move tool. And I can move that bowl wherever I want. And notice how the oranges inside the bowl go with it. But if I were to select one of the oranges in the bowl and just move that, well, I'm moving it away from its parent. So if I move it over here, then that orange will still be a child of the bowl, but it's moved relative to its main parent. So again, I can actually move things away from the parent and then move the parent itself. So those are some of the basics of how to select things as well as how to navigate hierarchies in the outliner. Now, in addition to this, we also have ways in which to display objects in the outliner. Now, the outliner has a display menu. I'm going to actually move this over to the side here. And what we have is by default, it's showing what are called DAG objects, and those are your main nodes for your objects. So if I were to select my chair here and go into my attribute editor, you notice that I have a standard object here called chair1, and that's my top node, and that contains all of my translation information. But if I go into display shapes, you'll notice how each one of these now all of a sudden becomes a hierarchy. And underneath this initial node here, I get one just for the shape. So you can see here in the outliner, I'm selecting the main node, which is basically the position information. This is where the object is, but it's not what the object is. The shape tells you what the object is. Now, this is kind of an esoteric concept, and it's not something that you really need to use on a day-to-day basis. So typically, I turn off shapes. It prevents a lot of confusion. Now, in addition to this, we can also turn on or off or display things that are connected, as well as reference nodes, and those are nodes that reference files on the hard disk. Now, another menu that you have here is the show menu, and I find this to be actually very useful. So what we can do is we can show objects by type. So for example, if I only wanted to see the lights in the scene, I could just click on lights and all of my lights would be shown and everything else would be hidden. And this is great if I have a lot of objects in the scene and I can't seem to find things. I can basically pare down my list just by using these checkboxes. So if I want, I can check things on or off. So for example, if I just want to see lights and NURBS objects, I can check both of these, and then I'll get my bowl, all of the oranges, which are NURBS surfaces, as well as my lights. Now, if you want to show everything, all you have to do is click Clear Below, and then that just defaults it to everything. As you can see, the outliner is a very handy window, and we'll be using it a lot as we explore Maya.